of us on the cutting room floor. Yeah. So what's the metaphor for the nonlinear era? Yeah, you can't do film on the floor anymore.
No, I don't know.
Oh well, okay.
In cyberspace.
In cyberspace.
I'm gonna now when I turn this on.
Don't look at it.
Yeah, look down or something, and when you look back up, it won't be quite as bright.
It's going to get hot in here, isn't it? Maybe we should turn the AC down.
All right.
Did you check and make sure the vents are open in here, Rich?
Because
The ladies' Bible study like to warm it up sometime.
No,
I thought it was open.
I think they're open, but is it or is
That
it
looks.
not?
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, that's open. Is that one open?
It is. Do you need to get back? Okay. If we all, God, we had you to revive.
Yeah.
And Frank.
Yeah, that's
opened it. Yeah.
Okay, and so
I thought they were open.
Yay.
Yeah,
yes, that one's okay.
that one's open now.
Now let me listen
Yeah, turn the temperature.
here.
It should be down on the place it's done. So leave the door open in the room and keep it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I need to, I'm gonna have Nick be part of my gaffer here.
Okay.
Nick, when the discussion is going to be some people over here, we're going to be talking, especially around here. We're going to move that microphone. So, for instance, let's go ahead and move it somewhere between Carrie and Patricia.
Yikes.
Yeah, right about there will be fine. Maybe a little bit more.
And it's called a shotgun mic, so be careful.
No, that's my phaser.
Oh, it's a
That's a
phaser?
phaser.
Okay.
If you mess up, it's going to.
That sounds like Star Trek. That's even worse. That one vaporizes us.
I look like a phaser.
All right. Let's see. Now I do have keys everywhere, and I don't.
This would be a good experience for Alice. They keep asking her to come on the Food Network.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've been.
Seriously?
Yeah, they've been tracking her on Facebook and Instagram and all that. They first a year and a half ago. The guy was calling her, messaging her. She thought it was a scam. And she kind of, so they've been just a week or two ago said, "Hey, we really want you to come and audition for the program." I don't think she's going to do it though.
Nice to be appreciated.
Make her business go bonkers.
She's already turning down business about 3 months out. So
Wow. That's incredible.
yeah, she's taking orders for September.
Wow. I love that.
All right. Yeah, Alice would have been a good addition here today. But
Yeah.
that's fine. And
She would have
Nick,
been
you're
better
gonna
than me.
have
I
to
could have been
fill
her
it.
gaffer if she showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna kind of start off with a little bit of a wide shot. In fact, as he starts with some of his opening monologue, I'm gonna just kind of do a little scan across, and then I'll end up over here as we then start directing the questions. Okay, all right, I'm gonna do a little clap, and that way I'll synchronize the audio
Should we
of
pray
both cameras.
Pray first.
And yes, let's pray. In fact, does anybody want to volunteer to pray for us? If not,
I could do it.
okay, thank you, Nick.
I'm a pretty straightforward prayer. So, Father, we are thankful that we're coming up on 40 years anniversary. We thank you, Father, for the grace that you've shown this church over the years. Father, we're looking forward to even bigger and brighter things. Father, we ask that you calm nerves here today, help us to have clear minds, speak clearly, Father, and that all of this, even though we're celebrating 40 years, may it be to magnify you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, stand by. Here we go. And we're off and running.
All right. As you are all aware, our 40th anniversary here at Grace Bible Church is this year. We've invited all of you here together to reflect back on some of those years, as well as to think about what might lie ahead for our church. And so thank you so much for being here. In Scripture, the number 40 appears all over the text, and sometimes 40 signifies a generation. Sometimes it might mark a season of testing or some other significant event. And so 40 is a significant number that brings us together today to talk about the history of our church for 40 years. So I want to start just by talking to David and Patricia Brown. You guys were one of the founding couples of our church, and maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how the church got started.
That's a big question.
Yes, it is.
So
It is.
it started probably when we started going to church at Northwest Bible and Fort Worth. That's when we really became interested in Scripture. We've been Christians, we were Christians when we married. I'd always been in the church, but when we really became appreciative of how Scripture was taught. We were there for about 3 years. I got a job in Granbury, came down here looking for a church. And our one-year elder from Northwest that sat down with Patricia and I one day and said, "Why are you driving back and forth? Your ministry is in Granbury." And it's kind of like, well, we tried that, but it didn't work. And so we pondered that question, and then the next thing happened. This is what Patricia's going to talk to you.
Well, the next thing that happened was after Joy had come down and encouraged us to pray about a ministry here. And, I had a question with one of the teachers at the elementary school where Julie and Aaron were attending about diet, and she said, "There's a lady out in Heritage Heights that is real interested in this too. You might go talk to her." Okay. And so I picked up the phone and called her, and she invited me over, and I went, and during just getting to know one another, she announced that they went to Grace Bible Church in Wichita Falls. She said, "Where do you go to church?" And I said, "Well, we've been visiting we've been at Northwest Bible Church in Fort Worth, and we've been going back and forth, but, we don't." And they are really a lot more outgoing. Their personalities were such that first thing out of her mouth, "We need a Bible church." Oh, yeah, let's do that. But she and her husband were really both very interested in doing that. They contacted Dallas Seminary and got a fellow by the name of Bob Salstrom. He was in charge of their student placement, I think. And some of the elders from Fort Worth came down and met with Brad and Sis and David and I one evening, and their biggest question was, "Do you want to start a Bible study, or do you want a church, or do you want a Bible study?" There's a big difference. And we wanted a church. And they had done enough research to know that at that time in this area there wasn't a church like that, and there probably is a real need for it. So that's what we decided to do. It was just, okay, let's do it. And it's fun to work with people that are more energetic. And the elders in Fort Worth kind of shepherded us and, would give us guidance, but we immediately started meeting in different places around Granbury. They said, "Do not meet in a home. If you meet in a home, it'll never become a church." And people tend to, it was just kind of a thing that people do. They think it's a Bible study and they don't get committed like that as they would a building. Well, we didn't have a building, so we met in bank boardrooms and offices on the square, and people came. And we even had a sandwich sign that we put out on the sidewalk every Sunday so people would know that we were meeting in the office on the square. And that's how it got started. We put little ads in the paper. I think there's a book here that has all the little ads that we put in. And do you want, I don't mind going further, but if...
Whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah.
And then even if we're gonna, maybe some of that will be covered by.
We can even circle back if we miss
Yeah,
anything.
that's how y'all found
Yeah.
it, was
Yeah.
through the ads.
So let's
That could be a
let's
good-
transition to David and Carrie then. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
All right.
stand by just one moment before you do that, Keith, and
All
I'm
right.
gonna move this way just a tad. And by the way, if you see me walk around and check that camera, don't be alarmed, I'm just
Don't look at
checking
him.
things out.
Pay no attention to the man behind the camera.
All right, we're ready for, just wait a minute. Nick, why don't you scoot up just a tad? That's good, right there. That's good. And we're ready for the next go around.
All right. So David and Patricia, shortly after you guys started Grace, another couple joined you. That's David and Carrie Gibson sitting right next to you here. And so why don't you guys tell us, as you came to Grace, what attracted you to the church? How did you come to be a part of it?
Well, first of all, we weren't a couple at that time.
I had just finished school and gotten a job in Granbury, and some relatives had noticed the ad in the paper and told me about it. And I had come from a Bible church down in the college town where I'd been to school and was looking for a place. And so I met this little group of a few people that were meeting in various places on the square. And so met David and Patricia and began attending that way. And but that was before Carrie and I had even met. So
And the dear lady that gave us the land for this church followed David. She was trying to find this church, and she saw the ad in the paper too. And she saw a young man on the square with a Bible, and she said, "He must be going."
she said she didn't see that sign. She just knew it was somewhere on the square. And she said, "I just saw this young fellow walk by with a Bible, so I followed him."
There you go. Yeah. So you started going before Carrie.
Yes.
Okay. So Carrie, when did you end up coming to the church? How did that happen?
Well, David and our first pastor decided to start a singles study at his apartment. And a friend of mine saw the ad for that in the paper, and she told me about it, and I said, "Okay, let's go." So, and then we found out that there was a church connected with the Bible study, so quickly started coming to that.
All right. Well, what were some of the things that, maybe some stories from those early years, or what are some milestones in your mind as you became a part of the church then, and what stands out in your mind from those early days?
There's one thing that really stands out in my mind that actually didn't come up till several years later, but it so stands out in my mind. This was far enough down the road that the Awanas program had started, and Randy and Brenda Price were here, and I think they may have been kind of a catalyst that caused that to occur. And Awana had been going for a while, and Randy was the commander and kind of in charge of that. But the reason it stands in my mind is I remember asking Randy one time, I said, "Randy, do you think if you left, the Awana program would just collapse?" And he immediately answered, "If it does, then we shouldn't be doing it. If this is Randy's program, we shouldn't be doing it." And I thought, that's a good answer. That should stand for everything about Grace Bible Church, whether it's Brad and Sis have gone, but the church didn't end. That this is God's work. And He uses us to do things, but it's God's church. And if any one person or couple moves away, it's still God's church.
That's right. That's right. Well, Rusty and Sheila, you guys have been here almost 30 years, so a few years after the church got started. What were some of the things that brought you to Grace Bible Church, and what are some of the memories and milestones that you remember along the way?
Well, speaking of Randy Price, he was the first person I met in Granbury. I was doing some yard work and needed something for my yard, and excuse me, I went to Granbury Farm and Ranch, and that's where Randy worked at the time. And he asked who I was and where I lived and about my family, and we got to talking. And he mentioned something about, do I have a church home? And I said, no, we still commute up to the Metroplex at the church we were plugged into up there. I was a relatively new believer at the time and really hungry for the Word of God. And so I was plugged into a really good Sunday school teacher up there and wasn't ready to give it up yet. And I was soaking it up like a sponge. And all that to say, as Randy and I talked, he says, well, let me tell you about Grace Bible Church. And then he told me about the Awana program. Never heard of it. And that was the first time I'd heard about Grace Bible Church. Time passes. Our son gets on a T-ball team. And Greg Warren is the coach. His son Jonathan's on my son's T-ball team. During some conversation at end of the season party at their house, we talked about church. Before you guys go to church, talked about the Lord a little bit, and Grace Bible Church came up again, and talked about the Awana program for the kids. And so it was on our heart. We needed to, kind of like the Browns were talking about earlier, we were commuting to the Metroplex, and it was, we were convicted about getting plugged into a local community and supporting a local church. And we shopped around, went to church a couple of times, and we liked what we heard. The Word of God was being preached. The inerrant Word of God was being preached. And no fluff, so to speak. And that's what I needed. That's what we wanted for our family. And so we started going to church and severed our ties from the church up in the Metroplex and joined the church here at Grace Bible Church. Kids got plugged into the Awana program. It was a fantastic program for our kids. It really worked out well. It's home. Has been.
As Rusty said, it was the sufficiency of Scripture, the value that this church holds for the sufficiency of Scripture that drew us. And also, after being here just a short time, it's easy to see the love that this body has for one another. And it's very winsome. It was then, it is now. And so we're very grateful to be a part of it and to walk through life in this church.
That's great. I'm going to
Stand by, yes, I want to move.
You want to move the mic?
Second.
You want to move the mic over to this side?
Move that mic over towards,
You guys are professionals, man. I'll tell you what. This side of the room's like, oh, we're done. Yeah.
I'm going to double his camera and make sure that he's still looking good.
I'm trying not to wander, Rich. You know how hard that is for me.
Right, I know. Oh, you're sure.
to wander?
Yeah, I prone to wander from the pulpit. Prone to leave the text I love.
You're going to be talking that way now, so I'm going to give that a little more space room there. There we go. And stand.
Coming to you guys next, so get ready for the pitch.
I'm getting some really good stuff here. Y'all are doing fantastic. Of course, I'm going to cut a lot out, but that's for time.
What's the line? It's all great. We'll change it all, right?
Yeah, it'll be a big song. Great, I'm going to cut it out.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, so version and then laugh at it. All right, we are ready to roll. Go ahead.
Well, Greg and Brenda, you guys have been here for many years also. And how many years is that? 35 years. And so talk to us about how you came to Grace Bible Church, and maybe you can talk about some of the favorite memories and some of the ministries that you've appreciated over the years.
Okay. Well, we also moved out of the Metroplex and tried to go back to the home church for a few weeks. Yeah. And we quickly saw that wasn't the way we needed to live, you know. we ended up here after trying 2 or 3 other churches briefly, and it was, I don't know, we'd been out at Baylor, and everywhere you went was a big Baptist church, and we were part of one here or there, and then we were in a larger Baptist church in West Fort Worth, and then came here. It was kind of like being in a neat new work, so there was a fun element to being a part of all that needed to go on to, like a big family trying to make things work, and that was encouraging, especially solidly built on Scripture. That was encouraging out from the start.
Yeah, I mean, we were young married. We had just had our first anniversary, so we were kids when we started coming, and young adults. So to hear the word, we came from a Bible teaching church, but this as a small congregation of pastors that were faithful and elders that were faithful to teach the word was what our hearts were hungry for, and to build into these sweet people that welcomed us and became your family, and helped us grow up as believers. So it's just been a joy to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any particular memories you have from those early years, stories, ministries you were involved in?
Well, everything.
Beginning, everybody does everything.
If we were going to do it, we were all doing it,
Mm-hmm.
And those early first few years, really, we got here, and the pastor was here a couple more years, I believe, and moved on, and we had the 2 years without a pastor where various folks filled in, but he filled in others, and so, there was just an all hands on deck part of life to ministry here. And then Terry came in 90, we had been here 6 years at that time, and so that it was just it was our family and our life, really.
Yeah, it's what helped us settle into this community, and I think support and how to live our lives based on Scripture within our young family as we grew as a couple, the Awana program started in between pastors, and our kids grew up in that program. Our oldest, who's 33, was 3 when Awana started. He was a first-year cubby, and so that was everything was focused around the Word and its sufficiency, and that was a huge foundation for us as a young couple. And so I'm so grateful for the faithfulness to the Word, how it was lived out in front of us, and showers for one. I just remember being showered with love when babies were coming, and this church has always exemplified sharing and generous hearts to the community and to each other. And there were hard times. And
But to face situations we didn't have answers for out of our
we
hip
were
pocket,
young.
and to be true to the Word and stick with that through those times.
God uses it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he really forged our faith here. So.
That's neat. So we've talked about Awana as being one of the key early ministries, and that still goes on today. What are some of the other ministries that you guys have been involved in over the years, and that maybe you've been a particularly significant part of in terms of starting that ministry, or one you've served in?
I think about all the Bible studies we've had here. Sally has been so faithful to teach green letters for I don't know how long, and she's taught Romans, and Cece has taught precept for longer than we have been here. And we had Margaret Henschel. We've had the summer Bible studies with Sheila and Becca and Carla, and just my life has just been filled with Bible studies since I came in.
That's neat.
Yeah, it was, I guess, talking about the precept, David Hubbard, initially when we first came here, I got involved with the precept series that he was doing for the men, and then also he taught us how to study the Bible. But there were other things going on too, like even from the pulpit they'd say, well, they're having this at Glen Rose, say at the Grace Community Church, like there was one on men's purity, and then another one that really good about shepherding children and grandchildren, because that's something that we're dealing with the grandchildren now. But there's other things, like I know one time, just a few years ago, Gary Vandell had a pretty in-depth study on Ezekiel at his house. And we did that, and then there's you could go on and on, but then we also have, once a month, we have a men's breakfast, and there's usually a devotion, a study, or testimony that's really meaningful, plus the breakfast. So that's been meaningful to me.
That's neat. Yeah.
I think one thing, as a small church, when we first came, missions was integral to the vision of the church. Linda Bloomquist, who's now Linda Beck, the Collar family, who we still support to this day. Even as a small church, the giving and the relationship with missionaries has been very, very much a priority. And then obviously grew our own missionaries, David and Carrie, and so that's just been a real blessing too. That it hasn't, the ministry hasn't just been focused here. It's been focused beyond. Small ways maybe in Awana, that's one of our largest outreaches, but also across the world through many individuals in the ministry.
And another thing we have that is outreach is our Good News Club. I've been involved in child evangelism for over 40 years. We've had camps, we've had hosted them in our homes, 5-day club. We've supported their missionaries, and so when I first moved to Granbury, I read in the paper that they were actually doing these in public school, and I couldn't hardly believe it. And so a number of years later, the opportunity came for our church to host one. And Rich just took it and ran with it. And I think we have one of the most successful and largest Good News Club in the district. I mean, 50 to 80 children coming every week. So I think that's, they say that children that hear the gospel early are much more likely to believe than people that hear the gospel later. So I think it's a wonderful program.
Yeah, that's great.
I want to do this. Let's talk to Lee and Joan and ask them.
I'm just going to go to the next one.
Okay, you probably got something in mind, and then what I was thinking was maybe what made them decide to get involved in Awana. And
that's right. I was going to go. Yeah, sounds good.
So just 1 second. I
Yep.
got to watch these wires here. Just 1 second. Yeah, thanks. Okay.
All right. Lee and Joan, you guys have also been a key couple in our church and have been here for how many years?
We got here in 1993.
Okay. All right. So talk to us about what led you to Grace Bible Church, and maybe you can also talk about some of the ministries that you've been involved in over the years.
You know, when we first came, Lee had transferred from the plant shutdown in Oregon, and so we ended up happily in Granbury. Of course, we didn't know which church to go to, so we started with the big ones, and we did a couple of visits over a few weeks. Then one weekend, Lee had to go off to reserve duty, and so the kids and I went to Grace Bible. We saw Grace Bible there, and we found the right church. And then you had some opinions too about having visited other churches and the vision that they had for their kids, which I think is significant.
One of the reasons we didn't go to those other churches. Rather than. So I think we went to one church and they said, we ran into this high school teacher and she said, you know, I've taught high school all these years and I don't know why bother because they all just fall away. And I said, well, that's not even close to our vision for what youth ministries should be. That, you know, we're establishing So we, I think I got Joan, because Joan, we had 4 kids, right? So Joan's very busy all day. So I think when we first started coming to Awana, it's just a break. I think all those moms that bring kids to Awana, just need a break. And Awana gives that to the moms. But I had a regular job, so I didn't need a break from the kids, right? So I started teaching Awana with, teaching pioneers with, actually Terry. So Terry and I we taught Ryan in pioneers. I think we taught Jonathan. So we got involved, I think, just we had a heart to want to be involved with youth. The church we came from, and we went to a Bible church in Oregon. We weren't looking for a Bible church. We came out of a Reformed Presbyterian background. That's just where I became a Christian. Our early churches were. But so we just wanted to be somewhere where we were engaged, teaching, working with youth. Like I said, so pioneers. The Quams, who were in the high school ministry, had a job change, which took him out of the area. So they asked us to come in, and we've been in there since. So our heart is to, have a life transforming 15 years for the youth, where they transition from, I go to church and I'm a Christian because my parents are, where I'm a Christian because I'm a Christian and I happen to have Christian parents. And that's kind of the message we teach. I know, Megan Warren had said at one time, she didn't get it. When I said that, it didn't make any sense to her, that they had to transition to a faith of their own. She says, and after 4 years, I got it. She understood what I meant and why I said that. That just because they grew up in a Christian family didn't make them Christians, and they had to transition from their parents' faith to their faith. So that's kind of.
That's always the way I've seen Grace Bible Church in general, as an equipping church.
Yeah.
We equip our adults, we equip our young children, we equip our teens through the ministries that we have, because they take it out into the world. And we've seen a lot of people come and go. We have. But when they leave, they're useful where they go, because they've been taught well.
They're big for ministry.
Yeah.
They've been grounded in the Word.
I want to go to Nick next.
Nick,
Yeah.
Just a moment. Yeah, and then Keith, if you'll sit back just a bit. Yeah, there we go. All right, go ahead.
All right. Well, Nick, you and Alice have been here for a number of years, but more recent than some of the other couples here. Maybe you can tell us what led you guys to Grace Bible Church and talk to us about some of the ways that you're serving here today.
I'd be happy to. We had been going to a Baptist church in Weatherford, and I was saved in 1993. I was 36 years old, saved in a Baptist church, and was very fortunate that the pastor taught the Word, and he was an expository preacher. And I moved to Texas in 2000, and had only been a Christian for 7 years, and was naive enough to think that all Baptist churches would be just like the one that I'd left in Florida. And so from 2000 until we came here in 2015, we were at the desperation stage by the time we came here. We would get up on Sunday mornings and listen to Steve Lawson or John MacArthur before going to church, and we would just feel so uplifted after listening to good, solid preaching. Then it was like, now we have to go to church. And to be honest with you, if Caleb hadn't have been living at home, because I did not want to give him the example that there was ever an excuse to avoid church. So we just gutted it out and kept going. But there's, looking back, there's a benefit to that, because that drove Alice and I both deeper. We weren't getting what we needed at church. We had to get it somewhere. So it drove us deeper into the Word, and it forced us to look outward at other places, and thank the Lord for the internet. And we, because of listening to MacArthur and Lawson and R.C. Sproul and others, and And then things were coming to a head. I was really trying to find a church, but could not find a church that really taught the Word. And I was at a point of desperation, so I found a contact email for gty.org, and I emailed John MacArthur. That's who I made the email to, but of course he didn't. I'm going right to the top.
You didn't get a phone call back from John.
But I got an email back from his assistant, and she sent me a link. And this link was, you could type in your zip code, put in a search radius, and they had a listing of all the master's graduates within the radius that you put in. So 2 churches came up, Countryside Bible Church and this church. And I decided to come to this church just because I felt like it would be smaller, and I hate city driving, and I didn't want to go that direction. So and I remember the first day we came to church, every mile of the church, Alice was in my ear, this is too far to go to church, too far to go, we can't go to church here, this is too far to go. And then on the way home from church, she was like, oh, I just love it there. This is our new home. And because we were driving, she's saying, we can't go that far. And I just said, let's not put any boundaries on the Lord. Let's just go and see. And that quick, I mean, I knew instantly. We've gone through a really hard time, we were so hungry. Mm-hmm. And we came here, and I agree with everyone here, the amount of love, it still amazes me. Susie Workman approached me a few weeks ago, and a year ago I'd asked for prayer for my brother. We thought that he might have Alzheimer's. And she came up to me a few weeks ago and just said, I've been praying for your brother, how's he doing? And that's just one example. I mean, that happens all the time. People will come and say, ask for follow-up because they're praying. And my experience had always been, you put your name on a prayer list and you don't really know if anybody's praying or not. Well, I know at least there are people, and I've had instances where several people have done that, and it floors me every time. So living in Weatherford, that's kind of a disadvantage. We've tried to figure out ways to serve, and it is at the end of a long work day to try to get out here in the middle of the week. It's tough, and I'm getting older, and so I'm more tired now, I guess, than I used to be when I get home. But I've been involved in church safety, almost from the outset of my Christian walk, and since 1993, and that was one gaping hole that I had observed here, but I really didn't do anything about it until the Sutherland Springs shooting. And that afternoon I emailed Terry and said, this has been on my heart, I want to get this started. And so now we have, I think, a first-class safety team. We have a group of people that are just really motivated and really dedicated. And we get together in fellowship. We call it Bullets and Burgers once a month. So we go shoot guns and go eat hamburgers, guy stuff, And but we have a really good, I think, it's the best safety team I've ever been a part of. So I thank the Lord that I have that opportunity to serve. I feel like a useful member of the church. Alice is involved in hospitality, and she really loves that as well.
Go ahead, what were you going to do, Keith?
I was going to go to home groups.
Go to home groups, okay.
Or you tell me, what do you still want to cover?
Let's do this. Because I had a really good conversation with Glenda on the phone a couple of days ago, and she had talked about the finance issue. And so I reworded that on the outline here as to how we might address that.
Okay.
And then just give her a chance to jump in, and she's got some good things to say along.
Do you want me to direct the question to her, just in general, and let her respond?
Let's do a kind of a general,
Okay.
and then she can start, and if others feel led to jump in, then please do.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go that route.
Okay. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things we'd all agree about is that God has always blessed us financially and has allowed us to provide for our needs, as well as to contribute to new ministries and sustain existing ministries. But obviously finances can be a real difficulty in any church also. So maybe some of you would like to talk about the financial part of the church and just how how does Grace view finances, and how has that been unique or significant in your thinking?
As the newest member here, one of the first things that Terry mentioned to me whenever I told him that I thought this might be our new home, he said, we pay for everything as we go. If it's something that we want to do and the Lord provides the financing, then we take that step. We're not in debt. And I just come from a church that was probably $2 million in debt, which puts a huge burden on the people. So I felt like that was just another plus. I don't think that churches should be enslaved to lending organizations and all that sort of stuff. So the fact that we do pay for things as we go, and the Lord's been faithful to provide, I assume because we're still here after 40 years, I think that's awesome.
Well, I know I was impressed when we came here, because I don't think I've ever been in a church before that didn't pass the offering plate. We just have a box at the back, and the money just comes in. And also the fact that money is very seldom mentioned in the pulpit, but we always seem to have enough. And you that haven't been here for many years may not know what our building was like a few years ago. We didn't have the beautiful sanctuary with a beautiful nursery and counseling rooms and reception area, and also the gym. We had old indoor-outdoor carpeting on the floor, and then we have this beautiful gym with upstairs rooms we can have conferences in.
And the kitchen.
Kitchen, state-of-the-art kitchen, and the Lord has just provided for us. Although we don't go into debt, He has provided this beautiful building for us.
And one thing is that there's never any real emphasis on keeping on with this project, but maybe something that's mentioned about the need at the beginning of a project, and then like in the Bible, it's Jehovah Jireh, God will provide, and He has, and so it gets done. I know we have other things in mind we want to do, but if we don't borrow money for it. And so.
Can I mention a small anecdote too? Some of you will remember, making do with what we have, and that calls to mind Randy Price. Every single week after church, he would take all of the pews out of the building and put them to the sides, right? And we'd all move it, and then he'd put a new circle down for Awana, and then they put it all back together after Awana every single week before we had this building, making do.
Truth in advertising, we have taken out short-term loans. And the short-term loan was for a period of promissory giving. So we have done actually very, very short-term.
Well, the original church was funded by the selling of bonds that we were trying to figure out or remember. There were no more than 10 or 12 families or groups that purchased those bonds and built the original structure. And then it wasn't too many years that I guess that if the bonds mature, you have to pay them back, and nobody wanted to be paid back. And so it was really.
We get the best deal going on bonds. Bar none. We had 3, 5, and 7-year bonds paying 10% interest. We could call them anytime we wanted to. And we took that money. Muriel Litton gave us the 3 acres where this church sits. December 2nd of 1980. We had our first services Easter Sunday. That was April 19th of 81. And we weren't completely finished, but that's 4.5 months. From slab, it was before the slab, it was just dirt and cedar trees. And here we were enjoying this church, the structure. And it's not insignificant to me that the Lord provided for that, and He has from the very beginning. We used to have kind of a rule of 10s. She mentioned it here. We get 10 couples, but if they're given 10%, we can afford a pastor. Providing they don't need anything else.
Yeah.
And providing no emergency show up and
Yeah.
we need to pay rent somewhere.
Yeah.
Or likely or something. But the Lord did provide. We never had to call anybody and say, throw something extra in the till here, we're short. We were never short. There was always a surplus. And so,
I think when Terry came on, there was not a consistent giving that was probably provided for his salary. Is that true?
I think that would be correct.
And then when Keith came on, the giving was not supporting Keith either. So the congregation, I think, both of those cases had to step up to meet the salary.
Last night when we were talking about all this, and I mean, there are so many things that could be said through the years. But I think one of the questions he had was about what are the meaningful events that you remember. And I couldn't think of anything but people. And I said, it's, and nobody does that either. People just walk in the door. And it seemed like the Lord through the years, when there was certain needs at certain times, and, maybe some of those people didn't stay, but it's like they came in and provided that need, and then, I mean, there just was always, there was just always, the need was provided some way. I know that happened with the music, and we had fellows here that really knew about building when the original structure was built, and it's incredible when you stop and think back through the years. And then my most memorable event, if I had to pick one, was Muriel Clifton. I will never forget being, we had these were little ads in the paper, and she called, and we were having a Thanksgiving fellowship. I think 6 of us. And she came to the home where we had it, and I was stunned, because if you stop and think, here is a near 80-year-old lady that was going to a large church. She had her own little prayer group. She was set church-wide, and she said no, she was coming to Grace Bible Church because her husband, when he was alive, had always prayed that there would be a Bible teaching church in Granbury. And she came and never left. She just, I know she prayed for this church and prayed for the men that were standing at the door to protect it. And I think that's been a big thing, that all of the years have been leadership here that has held fast to the Word of God. And I think God will honor that. And, we weren't particularly knowledgeable about anything. And I just think it's absolutely astounding that to know all the people we have known. We could probably sit here an hour and remember people who have come and gone. And I think that will be the future of the church too. You talk about generations change, but there will, if God wants this church to stand, He will bring who He wants to. And we have to, I guess that's the biggest lesson that I've learned through the years, is to, strengthen your faith, that the more you think about it, that God is going to provide what He needs. And there are things that change, and, there are bumps in the road, but you just have to trust and walk by faith and understand that God is doing His work. And I've just seen it. I guess I've been privileged to see it. And, we laugh and cry and laugh some more. Especially during the early years. I thought, oh, please, wouldn't believe what we
remember praying for older people. Now we're them.
Here we are.
And he was so faithful. Elmo and Ramona Lowe.
Oh, yeah.
And then Sally and Russell, who were mature believers who began to build into us. And then we kind of got on the older end, and we lost some of our younger families, and then the Lord brought younger families again. And so it's been wonderful to watch his faithfulness.
I have to comment on that because
Okay, hang on just a second, Joe.
yeah.
Keep that thought, keep the thought.
I love that you have prayed
Okay.
for older people.
Go ahead, Joe.
Jean McCracken,
Yes.
a prayer warrior that she is, started praying because we were all getting older.
Yes.
And she started praying
We
for
did too.
younger people.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then she started, and of course they came.
That's
it,
right.
It was just astounding. And then her more recent prayer was that we would have people come to the church, be longing for the Word of God, because we were still quite small, and the Lord brought them from faraway places, like Weatherford, like even Austin,
Yes.
and where else? Dublin,
Mhm.
right? And so the Lord heard those prayers and so graciously answered to bring people here.
So this has been great just to reflect on the past and God's kindness, His provision, His faithfulness. I would love to hear, what are your thoughts and prayers and hopes for the future? What are the next 40?
Before we go
Yeah,
Let's talk about home groups, sorry.
Okay.
And so,
All right.
did you want to direct that towards anybody, or just open it?
I'll just open it up.
Okay,
Is that
go
good?
ahead.
Okay. All right. See, the director has that privilege. You see that? Okay. All right. So one of the ways we've tried to emphasize relationships, which I think is a theme of a lot of what we've talked about today, is through our home group ministry, where we have smaller groups. So I think most of you are a part of a home group. Maybe some of you could share about how that has particularly ministered to you and been a context where you can get to know people in a more personal and intimate way.
Well, no, we were concerned because there was a list of different home groups, and we were going to be one of them, but it wasn't in the bulletin for several Sundays. And so we're thinking, are we going to find anybody? But they showed up. And so we had a wonderful, pleasant, diverse group of people come, and we had Lee and Joan were gracious enough to facilitate that, and he taught Thessalonians and Titus. But the main focus each time was on prayer for each other and, how are things progressing? Are prayers being answered? Are there new prayer needs? And so it was a wonderful time. Plus we had some great food, too. You might have something to add about.
Well, I just think it's nice to have an intimate group of people that you can pray with, because there's a lot of things you don't want to share with the congregation, but you're always interested in sharing with an intimate group and knowing that they will genuinely pray for those things.
I could say kind of the same thing. We're in Dawn and Melanie Dietrich small group, and it's been wonderful. We've been there for about 5 years now, and our group, we meet every week on Tuesday night, which I think we're one of the few ones that meet on a weekly basis. But for us, it's a time of refreshing because, like Linda was saying about their group, there's an intimacy there that you don't always get at church just because of time and constraints. But there we really get to fellowship with one another. We laugh and we talk and we eat, but we also always pray, talk about one another's needs and spur one another on. So it's a great time in the Word.
Just so you know, I have a kind of a prayer request for home groups, because I am in Weatherford and we started a home group. It's probably been 3 years ago, but one of the burdens that I have is people that are Christians that don't get to hear the truth in church. So I actually reached out to some people that we used to go to church with, and that has, up until very recently, has made up our home group. It's us, and because we live in Weatherford, there's nobody else from this church that has joined us until a week ago. And we've been praying for Grace Bible people that live in Weatherford to come to our church. So we were just recently joined by the Treats, and they've contributed. Yeah, they are. And so we would like to see our group grow, and we would like to see any Weatherford Grace Bible people come to it, but there's also other people, anybody that wants to come, so there's other people that come to it as well. And I agree, it's a really good time. It's a time of refreshing. It's a time of being connected with fellow believers. We're all brothers and sisters. We don't have to be in the same church to be brothers and sisters. So we connect with brothers and sisters, and we share the word, and we pray for each other, and we've grown really close to the people. And I'm looking forward to getting to know the Treats better as they continue to come.
Okay, whatever you want to do, Keith.
Yeah, we skipped a few, but you want to land the plane now, or
What did we skip?
difficulty?
Well, let me just ask this. Has there been what y'all would consider challenging or difficult times?
No, none at all.
I mean,
I think we should, if we have time, I think we should ask the question. So,
okay.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
So, all right. You ready?
Yeah.
In a fallen world, there's no perfect churches, and all churches have difficulty. And so I know as we look back to God's faithfulness that a lot of times we've seen that faithfulness and that provision through difficult times. So maybe some of you have a story or two that you can share about how God particularly worked through a difficult time in our church's history.
Well, earlier I mentioned having hard times and not knowing an answer, but just the reliance on the Scripture, and that's what struck us when we came to church. Was here was a group of folks trying to build church life around God's Word, not on best techniques or what looked good or what seemed popular, but simple faith on reliance on the Word. So when hard times would come, people stuff, hard situations, hard questions to answer. That's the only place we knew to go, and the only place we did go. So, and tomorrow we'll do the same thing. We would do it that way in our home. We'll do that here. So, change the circumstances. We can't change the answer. Go to the same place, in the same faith and trust.
I've always liked I have had to grow in how I understand the hard times, but I really do see it in the context. I feel like this is my church, this is my family, and I have to look at it as my family and treat it as, and understand the problems as, God is doing something. I don't know what He's doing, but I have to trust Him. And that's hard to do sometimes it's hard when you have emotions about it. But you have to put all that in the context of God's Word and remember who He is and let Him do His work. And I guess that's the advantage of being around a while. You can look back and say, well, look at all He has done. And so we can trust Him, and having people that feel the same way about stuff like that encourages you and builds you up, and it holds you accountable. We are accountable to one another, and I think that's a real strong aspect of this church. I think this church body holds us accountable. It's not something you necessarily talk about, but just like you would in your family. I mean, it's you just have to love it and love God, what God is doing. And if we have difficulties, we keep trusting the Lord and don't react like the world when hard times come, because they will come. Just like, you've all got kids. And so, but that's kind of how I have grown a little bit to understand how to work in God's church.
Yeah, I want to segue that, and I don't know quite how to do this, but talking about biblical counseling, the idea that, speaking of challenges, we all
I think,
come up against problems.
well, I think it comes from the trials that have come here, the joys that have come here. The focus has always been on how the Word of God applies to our lives, and how do we use His Word to help us through the trials, to help us worship rightly. And the church discipleship, mentoring has always been the significant part of this. And so when Keith came and with a counseling background, knowing Stuart Scott, I know for me personally, we have relationship in church, but how do we have a purposeful, intentional relationship with each other to apply the Word to circumstances, our fears, our worries, our anxieties, our joys, our anger, relationships, marriages, parenting. And so for number one, how does that affect my relationships within this body? That I be more purposeful and intentional in my conversation with my other sisters in Christ that might be struggling with that. And then again, how could we show this community how applicable and sufficient God's Word is to every area of our life? And so that's what drew me to biblical counseling, that it would equip us, my heart, and ready my heart to know His Word and to be able to express it to others in a way that would help encourage their hearts and draw them closer to Him. So that's, I think, been the joy of the counseling ministry that we've had within our own congregation, and also now to the community and to the world, honestly, which is pretty exciting for a small church, the effectiveness and how the Lord has used that and grown that. You can talk about how
That was great.
that started.
That's a wrap.
Because you brought it here.
Yeah, Keith, tell us about how that all came about and your background in that area and how it's grown and significance it's played in church growth.
Yeah, well, I think what Brenda just said, really, biblical counseling is just an expression of the theology and philosophy this church has always embodied. And when we talk about formal counseling, that's exactly what you said. It's being more intentional, it's being more purposeful in our relationships, and then even creating a context where we would invite people from the community to come with their hurts and their needs, to sit down with a trained discipler that can then help them with those needs. And when I became a new Christian, I was burdened to help people with the practical problems of life. That started watching my own family need help in our family growing up, and looking for that in a local church and not finding it, and then being involved in a very painful church situation where we had abuse going on in our church. And as a church, you talk about going through hardship, and the church is, how do we help these hurting people in the wake of this horrific situation? So I really went to seminary with an agenda, not just to know theology and to learn the languages and all of that, but I really went with a burden to know, how do we take God's sufficient Word and the resources in Christ and help hurting people? So I came to Grace Bible Church with that in my heart, and that's part of the reasons we loved coming here and love being here, is that that's what our church has always desired to do, is to reach out to one another in the Word, to preach it, to talk about it, when we sit down, when we rise up, and whatever we're doing. And really the way God has grown biblical counseling here is just allowing us to develop that same philosophy and theology we've always had into a more formal training of other disciplers, and also into a community outreach where people come for free counseling. And what a great opportunity to evangelize our community by helping them to see that their problems are really resolved ultimately in a relationship with Jesus. So.
And then David's hearing it from David. Maybe part of that.
Yeah, it's going around the world. So.
I have a funny story that doesn't necessarily need to be on the camera. At some point, decades ago, Carrie and I got unhappy with the way some things were going here at the church, and we got to thinking, I got to thinking anyway about going somewhere else. So we actually did the reverse and started traveling to Fort Worth. And we made the mistake of visiting the church that David and Patricia had come from. And so some of the elders that had come down to help us start were there, and we sat next to Bill and Bonnie Jackson. And so we visited. We didn't tell them while we were there, but they could tell. And they said, we'd be welcome to have you here, but you need to go home. They said, you need to go home and take care of whatever the problem is. Go home and take care of it. And I think that all gets, the whole point of the gospel is reconciliation and broken relationship. It's first ours with God and then ours with each other. That's the gospel.
Yeah.
Roll credits. All right. You want to do the future one real quick,
Sure.
and then we'll... Okay.
That's 2 Corinthians 5:17.
Sounds biblical, doesn't it? Yeah.
That we're new creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Old ways have passed. They're
That's
gone.
right. That's right.
And we've been given the gift of reconciliation. And we're ambassadors to do that. That's what we're called to do. And it's our privilege to be able to do it. That's what's very unique about this church body is that the sincerity, the uniqueness of the genuineness of people's hearts. Love for the Lord and love for the Word. And once you get away from that, things go awry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's been being here now 35 years and raising our kids here. That's been passed down to another generation, now our grandchildren. Some of them are here. And I think about everyone in this room has impacted my children and now my grandchildren. And what an incredible blessing that is, that we're not perfect. None of us in here are. We've walked with each other through some very difficult times. The Lord has been faithful, and we have seen that faith now through generations. And now He has brought those kids to adulthood who are now beginning to minister here. And I'm so grateful. And minister around the world. I don't think any of our kids have left untouched from being here. By people who have invested in them and poured the Word into their lives and their love and prayers into their lives. And I'm so grateful.
And I just want to say, it wasn't just their growing up years.
Yeah.
Even since then,
Yeah.
you guys have reached out to my children as adults at other places, spoken to their lives. And it's a great appreciation I have for this body.
Well, along those lines, what are some of your hopes for the next 40 years as we think about those generations that are coming, they're living out their own faith now? What would you pray and hope that God might bring and do in the coming years?
I pray that I am faithful, that I would be as diligent as the people who poured into my children's life, who poured into children's life here. Many times we struggle finding workers for children's ministry. And it is the next generation. I think we need to seize that opportunity.
Somebody speak to maybe how Awana has always prepared people for, the next generation. And how you've seen that happen. Like, for instance, Brenda, your kids have been in since an early age. And I think you alluded to that. So do you see that as playing a big role in preparing the next generation?
Yeah, I think we want to, again, I'm grateful for the focus of grace. The programs that we do, the ministries that we do are focused around the Word and the Gospel, and I want to bringing the Word alive to our kids, cementing it in their minds and hearts. Lord willing, that was our prayer as they memorized it and learned it. It was a blessing for our children. It provided fellowship. It provided them looking out to kids that were brought in from the community. Now my grandkids are coming, and that continues on because of the faithfulness of so many that continue to want to build and pour into their children's lives, and so we're grateful.
Yeah, I like one is an early and a sure foundation. I think somebody said earlier, and the philosophy that our young adults, junior and senior high, as they're cared for with, as Lee spoke earlier about building them to stand on their own before the Lord in their faith, and again, not pattern a youth ministry after a worldly viewpoint or anything, but that it's time for y'all as young adults to grow to know the Lord and His Word, through His Word. That's key, for them in those years to see the reality of applying the faith, the Scripture to their own lives. That's what takes them on. We always laugh at the memories we have. You raise your kids and you speak into their life, and you're working on this issue or that issue and this issue, and you just feel like it's bouncing off their ears. And then they come home from the Sunday night summer Bible study and they say, Dad, you should have heard what we said. And we're going, same thing we've been saying all 6 years maybe. But it's like, yes, I heard it, and it's just driven home and cemented. It's such a blessing.
That's true, because raising kids here, the joy of it was that anybody in this room would be saying much the same thing to them about how the Lord loves them, how faith applies. They would be giving them the same advice. It was consistent. We all live it out differently, but it was consistent, and that was a huge grace here.
I know just from the experience with our kids, everybody in the church is on duty around kids or watching. And I know Julie has commented particularly about the testimony of the women of this church that she remembers, and not that anybody specifically sat down with her and told her something, but she was around and knew the people and knew she took a lot away from that. And she even commented not too long ago, she evidently had been watching one of our services on the computer, and she said, do y'all know how beautiful that church is? And I went, it's like everything else just kind of stuns me. Well, I think it's really nice. I think I love our sanctuary. She says, no. She said, it just, that just is really beautiful to me. And I said, well, I'm glad it's blessing me. And, but, just little things like that are important, or they testify of the kind of work that the Lord is doing here. And I could probably talk forever. A lot to it. I told her, we were telling Brenda one 40 years, but I said, I feel like we just all kind of finally grew up.
Yes.
And, you know, we were kids, and then we had to be teenagers, and, you know, you look upon it, and it's kind of like, I think we're growing up. And I guess that will be our path forward, and we'll just grow as the Lord wants.
All of our children are now older than we were when we started the church.
Yeah.
So,
I like what you said. The Lord was looking out for us because we didn't know it. We were trying to be devoted to the Lord, but we sure didn't know much.
so that's a great question. What would you want to say to that generation that was your generation when many of you came, but is now the up-and-coming generation today in our church? What would you tell them in light of God's faithfulness these 40 years?
I remember, it was actually when I was in seminary, I actually learned some useful things in seminary. And I remember one of my professors saying that the Lord is much more interested in us really trusting Him than in being exactly right all the time. You know, there'll be a lot of fog, and we may not always know exactly what to do, but we can still trust Him as we do our best, and He's gonna build His kingdom.
I was encouraged a few years ago by a fellow named Randy Patton. I had dinner with him, and he just, I don't know his exact words, but it was so encouraging. I almost went, good. He said that this church, the size of this church, has reached beyond its really ability or capacity. It's working beyond about what God is working, and it's hard for us to see it sometimes, but we just have to, like we did the Lord, hold fast to what He wants, and keep plugging along.
And that's what I would say to people, the persevere. One of the things that I have appreciated about your teaching, Keith, was the series you did on Job, and the series on Philippians as well, and suffering. Because we perceive suffering as failure, but it's God's assignment in our lives. And when we persevere through that, there's so much to be gleaned, to be gained from it. I'm grateful for that. So persevere, young people.
It's been on my mind lately, as we get some years behind us, but it's our role to equip this group we're concerned with that comes along behind us, and we need to be purposeful in what's ahead for us and what we do and how we spend our time. And yet, I guess it would be like Paul's message to Timothy or any of those kind of urgings, that you seek the Lord, you stay true to His Word. That, you can't change the foundation, but it has been at the front of my mind that these later years, what am I going to be spending on?
You asked the question about difficulties. I don't really think of any great difficulties. I mean, we've dealt with issues, minor issues, but kind of one of the ones that going to two services has challenged many people, just because the closeness and the comfort and that they feel. But it's amazing if God's doing something. Her church, the two-service format has boomed the attendance at our church. I mean, maybe you don't see that, but in the last 2 years, we've grown about 25%, 25 to 30%. The 2 years before that, it was flatlined. If you just look at church attendance, it's a stress on all of us not to have that unity of the single service. people who are coming to the church, who are joining the church, because there's a place to sit down. Crazy as that may seem. But for our church to do the things it's doing, we just simply went to two formats, to two-service format, and it's been hard on a lot of people. It's hard on everybody who serves on Sunday. But for our church to minister to people, it really, it's been amazing what's been going on. Like you just look at the number of people in the last 2 years that have joined connected to us. Now our problem is not where people sit and where cars park.
We should say something about evangelism too, though, as a future objective. And it's so exciting what Susie Wortman has administrated for us to get us out in the community. And all of the sermons about evangelizing have found an outlet through this door-to-door ministry. And it's so exciting to be able to communicate the things we've learned from the pulpit and get out there with real people with real needs and expand our ministry. And it is notable that some of the youth are coming along with that too, and that certainly is a factor in our future, not just the growth, but in our ministry, our solid ministry, and the outlet for evangelism that we have all yearned for, I think, many of us for many years.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, there's an hour and 20 minutes almost of good stuff here. I think we just need to tell Terry that Sunday that all we'll do is just watch. And there may be some more that y'all want to add, but because of time restraints, maybe we need to.
Yeah, the director's cut.
Well, yeah, we'll do the long version and the director's cut.
Do you want me to do the conclusion thing, or do you need that?
I guess so, and then if y'all want to continue to mention a few things, I can add that. What I've been doing just recently is, y'all were talking, is trying to get some what's called cutaways. People shaking their heads and things like that.
Checking their watch, picking their nose.
Chewing their gum.
Yeah. Arms crossed, like, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
See what we can do to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you all for being here today. What a great joy to hear stories and reflect on God's grace and faithfulness these 40 years. It brings God glory when we spend time thinking about His faithfulness in particular ways to us, and that, as it's been said today, gives us a confidence for the future. So thank you so much for being here, and may God continue to be honored in and through our church.
Well, all right.
Yeah. And I went beyond what you wrote, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
It was supposed to be a common, oh, yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah.
No, we got it.
Are you going to do
Music up.
You going to do a blooper reel?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe there's the, I don't know, the part that where it's, kind of made a few people guilty or something. Okay, I'm going to stop. First of all, I want to thank everyone